Welcome to the September 2024 Inside Nutley Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Greco, and today we are going to talk with professional musician, audio engineer, and Nutley High School Class of 1978 graduate, Keith Pied. Welcome, Keith.
Hey, Tommy, how are you?
The list of people you have worked and played with reads like a who's who of the biggest acts in popular music. Off the top of your head, what was your most thrilling professional moment?
There are quite a few, actually. The Led Zeppelin reunion for Atlantic back in, I want to say 98, around there. That was pretty wild. We had them for 3 weeks and I was their engineer. And by, I guess about the third or fourth day, we have these big windows in one of our studio and they were opened. And everybody on the block started catching little Zeppelin every day, and before you knew it, it was like the streets started to get crowded. People started going on the top of the buildings. It was like the Beatles when they played on top. That was very cool. That was a highlight.
Was that a secret? Did anybody
Oh yeah, no, it's always a secret.
Right.
You know, nobody ever knew, or it wasn't announced if somebody was coming in.
You and I go way back to Unico School in the mid-'60s. Were you born in Nutley?
No, I was born in North Carolina. My mom and dad moved up here 61, 62, somewhere around there, to Yale Street. My dad was working in Manhattan for IMP. My mom was working at St. Paul's as a musical director and choral. And that's where it all started. And my father actually, when he got the job in IMP, he was up here for a little while without us. And somebody told him about Nutley. And he came in and fell in love with the place. And my mother tells stories. They came up here in a snowstorm when my mother came with us. And they came down Passaic Ave. And she said there were fires at the mud hole and people were ice skating. And she said it was like the most enchanting place she'd ever been. She fell in love with it. And that was the start.
So I don't remember anymore, getting old, but did you start at Unico from kindergarten?
No.
No?
I started in Washington because my parents were in the garden apartments on Yale Street until I was 10 and then moved to Vreeland.
Okay.
So I had my Washington school pals and then my Unico school.
I remember you lived on Vreeland Avenue by the mud hole. What are some of your favorite memories from that time?
We lived in the mud hole, you know, ice skating all winter long, causing trouble the rest of the time.
Sleigh riding?
Sleigh riding. I mean, that was where we hung, you know. It was great times. I mean, when you woke up in the morning, you went out, you played. You know, you didn't come back sometimes till dinner.
I have a list of places from back in the day. I want to see if you remember them, what memories you have of them. All right? First of all, being a musician and a lover of music. How about Giovines?
Yes. Totally. Giovines, anything I needed, I pretty much bought there. Sheet music, you know, little things here and there, and everybody ended up started teaching there, but you're talking about way back.
Yeah. Here's one. You got to remember. Jack's Sweet Shop. That was right up the street from you.
So, of course.
Your memories of that?
Going up there just about every day for a New Yorker or a Mavis. That was the place, you know, after you're all hot and sweaty from playing, just to go there and chill out. In fact, I ended up working for Jack, putting together his papers on Sunday.
Really?
Yeah.
Jack's a Nutley
you
legend.
know, like 11 years old, 12 years old. So.
How about Dolly's?
Dolly's, we would all go there for lunch.
For burgers?
Yeah, for the burgers and fries.
Yeah.
That was a big thing.
For those of you who don't know, Dolly's was a burger place down on Franklin Avenue, like right where I think it's where the jeweler place is right now.
Dolly's with Arlette Gravel and Seta and Darlene Marchetti, Julie Doris, the whole crew.
Yeah.
Richie Larcara.
Yeah.
How about the Annex?
Yes, of course, the Annex. That's where I bought most of my albums, or everybody stole their albums from there.
I was gonna say, everybody who bought albums.
You went in with your backpack and walked out with like a month's supply.
When did you start first playing music?
Started when I was a tot. My mother taught me, but kind of, went in and out of it in phases. And I felt like I really started to get into it, I guess, 12, 13. Really started to like kind of practice a lot.
Was it more a case of you wanting to learn to play, or was it more like your mom saying, hey, you got to play an instrument, you got to do something with your time?
A little of both. She taught all of us in the family, you need to learn this. So we did. And depends what you did with it.
Right.
My sister became a music teacher. My brother started out as a writer, artist, now carpenter. But everybody ended up in the arts between my mother and father, yeah.
What or who inspired you?
Listening to all, Yes and Genesis and The Who and all that stuff. That's what really inspired me. But there was one point where, the art world, I was really thinking about going into commercial art. I love to paint, I love to draw. I was pretty good at it, but the music always was tugging me in another direction, and that's what I ended up doing.
I tell people all the time that we were so lucky to grow up with so much incredible music in the 60s and the 70s. What were some of your favorites growing up?
Like Yes, Genesis, Zappa. I actually listened to a lot of country back then, like
Really?
Marshall Tucker and New Riders and Grateful Dead. But it was really that Yes, Genesis, Pink Floyd, Zappa, kind of the heady, trippy stuff.
The prog music, really.
Yeah. That really got Emerson, that got me into all that. And then I slowly started getting into like the jazz world from my father. People like Keith Jarrett and Herbie Mann.
What instruments do you play?
Piano, synthesizers, organs.
Keyboards.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first gig?
I think my first time I ever played was with Vinnie Rotacco, Andy Morton, and this other guy, Bob Weinbrock. We put together a little band in high school, and we played up at Montclair State in the, I guess their version of the boiler room or the pub room.
Right.
That was the first time.
Do you remember the feeling?
Felt good.
Did the bug bite you then?
Oh, I had already had the bug, but yeah, that was the first time.
What was the name of the band?
Tetris Symmetry.
Tetris Symmetry?
Yeah, which
Wow.
Vinnie Rotacco would say that's a stupid name.
I don't remember us having any classes together at Nutley High. Were you like out and playing in a lot of clubs and stuff, or rehearsing at that time?
Oh yeah, I kept playing.
Right.
Doing little things here and there. It was really like my senior year. I was like, made the decision to do the music thing, and that's when auditioned for Berkeley up in Boston, got in, and then that was a whole nother path.
As I mentioned, you were part of the Nutley class of 1978, as am I. But then you headed to the Berkeley School of Music. Tell us about that.
Once I got accepted, packed my bags in September, jumped on the bus, went up there, and that was just a great experience because getting thrown in with like literally the best musicians in the country and around the world, and kind of like going, I don't belong here. Like realizing, you got a lot of work to do. I was like going to school with like Pat Metheny, Steve Vai,
Really?
Mark Ledford, I don't know if you know him, Tommy Campbell, Dave Rosenthal, who's Billy Joel's musical director, who ended up doing Moving Out. That's his. Just a lot of guys who became the go-to people for just about every band that's out there.
Right.
So it was great, and got a lot of nice connections, and still kind of talk to them, and saw them a lot after I ended up in the city working with them. But great time.
Going from Nutley to Berkeley is a bit of a transition, no?
Oh yeah, going to Boston was
Yeah.
a whole nother thing, and Boston was really cool because basically every other block was a college.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
yeah, I mean, it was like Berkeley. 2 blocks away was Northeastern. A block from there was New England Conservatory. You go north, and it was Boston University, and then Harvard, and Sims Girls School, which is where all the Berkeley guys went on Wednesday nights. You'd go in there, and there'd be nothing but these guys. And you'd be like, what is this, gay bar or something? And then, like, all of a sudden, the girls would be done with their studying at, like, 9:30, 10, and come down. But it was a lot of fun.
Did you come back to Nutley after you graduated?
I was getting ready to go to Norway. I was living in Cape May for the summer. Getting ready to go to Norway with a fusion band. John Martino calls me. And John goes, Keith, my cousins have this band. They're on the verge of a deal. They're looking for a keyboard player. You interested? I said, well, I'm really going to Norway, but I'll drive up. I'll, see what's up. I'll audition. I did. Make a long story short, got it. And they were all Nutley guys. And
What was the name of the band?
Voices. That was with the Mascara brothers. Don Regan and Joey Golds.
Joe Goldberger.
Yeah, Joey Goldberger.
And Dennis and Scott, right?
Yeah, Dennis and Dave.
Yeah.
And we had a nice little run for like 3 years. On the verge of almost a nice deal. Ended up getting a little indie thing that went nowhere. But I kind of sort of writing on the wall that after 3 years that was kind of going nowhere.
Right.
So I bowed out of that and went back to engineering school, audio engineering in the city. And did that for a year and got out and was searching for a studio gig. And I don't know, I must have looked around for a year, and of course everybody wanted internships for free, no money. I'm like, I gotta pay rent, I can't, you gotta pay me something.
You joined Montana Studios in New York City. How did that come about?
So out of the blue, my teacher at the audio school, which happened to be a guy I knew from Berkeley, he calls me up and he goes, Keith, I got this perfect gig for you in Manhattan. The quality control engineer from Atlantic Records is opening up a place, a rehearsal touring facility, and you'd be the perfect guy to run it. So I go meet this guy, and takes me, and end up there for 30 years.
What did that job entail at first?
I was the chief audio engineer, and so basically every band that came in that didn't have an engineer, I was their engineer. So I'd get them ready for their tour or their album or whatever they needed. I was the go-to guy, and did that for probably 3-4 years. And then the main guy, lucky enough, was stealing from the other partners, and they took him to court, threw him out, and they awarded me and the other 2 guys the place. And the other 2 partners were silent partners. They knew nothing about the business. They were just money people. Right. So then it totally fell in my lap, and I ran it and did everything from that day on.
Do you remember the first time you were starstruck?
Well, the number one cardinal rule is you could never be that. And so...
Internally, though.
Internally, I mean, I was working with, like, Miles Davis before he died. And I'm like, this is pretty cool. Or like working with Madonna or Cyndi Lauper or Anthrax, Slash, Guns N' Roses. I mean, all that stuff, but you start to get used to it.
Yeah.
And you realize that you treat them just like we're sitting here now.
Yeah.
You never treat them any differently. And that's what they want. That's what they like.
About 20 years ago, we used to publish a music magazine for a compact disc chain in New Jersey. And I used to get to interview a lot of the rock stars, a lot of people that you worked with. And I found that it kind of was bittersweet because my hobby became my job. And it kind of ruined it a little bit for me, especially when, you know, never meet your hero. Some of them turned out to be not the nicest people in the world. Did you find that at all?
You definitely get a little jaded. People want you to like go out and see these shows, and I'm like, no, I just spent, I've been with all these people. I really don't want to go to the show. And they would always invite me to shows, and I would never go. Occasionally I would go. I'd bring my wife or a friend who really liked that band. But for the most part, I just wanted to come home and listen to nothing.
Right. I mean, some of them would be like really real, I don't want to say mean, but they'd be rude. A lot of rude people. But then again, some of the people you'd expect to be the worst were the best. I know one of my favorite interviews of all time was, believe it or not, was Gene Simmons. I think it was the only interview I ever did where the guy remembered my name at the end of the interview. I
got to work with Paul Stanley for years, and he was in all the time. Sweetheart. I found that 99.9% of the people who made it, who were up there and been in the business for a while, were always super nice. Never had a problem, except for one person, J-Lo.
Really? All right. You have to tell us that story.
J-Lo, her musical director is Omar Hakim, the drummer. Omar I went to Berkeley with, and Omar, anybody who went to Berkeley who became musical director, brought the project to me. So Omar comes in, crew comes in, setting everything up, get everything ready. J-Lo's coming in at night. I go home, did my job. My night guy calls me. He goes, Keith, they're going to pull out of here if you don't let them do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Well, they want to like build stuff and gobos and this. Let them do whatever they want. So the next morning, I walk out of the elevator into the lobby, and I walk out into like a box. I'm like, what the hell is this? They had built a room within our lobby just for her. And it's all lined with fur. It's got a little waterfall. It's got all this here. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, now, anybody who was really big, they would rent our entire place. So it's theirs. They do whatever they want. Right. They didn't want to pay the money. So they have one room. So I'm walking around. I go into the bathroom in the back. She's got a padlock on the ladies' bathroom. So I break it off with a hammer. I go in there. That's lined with fur. It was just over the top, beyond, and she didn't deserve, to be like that. And we ended up dealing with them for a few days, but I said, listen, you got 2 other studios. Anybody wants to come in your little room in here or whatever, and the woman's bathroom, you can't say shit or get out. They dealt with it. They left. And as they left, the day they left, she was on, I think, Good Morning America. And that's where the term, she's telling him, oh, I'm just a down-to-earth girl. I'm Jenny on the block. I want to say Jenny on the block. I was like, wanted to get on the phone and say, this girl, I said, I've worked with just about everybody, and nobody's ever been like this.
Was the studio mainly used for rehearsals, or was there recording going on as well?
I did a lot of like demos for people, for them getting deals, and we did lots of showcasing. So we get bands from like really all over the world that would fly in to like do something for Atlantic or Island or Def Jam. So we did a lot of stuff, and really from jazz to rap, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, just all kinds of crazy stuff.
All right, now let's get to some of the juicy stories. I want to ask you about some of the artists you work with and your impressions of them. Did you ever work with any of the Beatles? First of all, that's my thing. You know that.
I got to work with Paul McCartney.
That's a Beatle.
He came in. He came in. It was kind of this. Whenever Bob Dylan was in our place, he would attract kind of everybody. And there was a pretty special night where Dylan was in, and Keith Richards showed up, Eric Clapton, and McCartney. And they're all hanging out, and they're, doing their thing, and the booze and everything else is very, very cool.
Did the 12-year-old Keith deep inside you ever want to just go up to them and say, hey, guys, can we take a picture?
If you look around, there's no pictures with me, except if somebody asked me. In fact, Jerry Tovey broke the cardinal rule.
Wait, let me guess. If it was Jerry, it had to be something to do with James Taylor.
I never told Jerry, but after he came in and James realized what was going on, he never came back after that. Oh, wow. But I didn't want to tell him.
Tell us about your experiences with the Rolling Stones.
We used to do their background vocal auditions for their tours, but never really got to. Actually, I can't say that. His band, the Winos, they would come in because Steve Jordan was a drummer for that, and I was pretty close with Steve. That's the only time I got to work with him, but never like the Stones. But Keith, yes.
What about Prince?
Got to work with him once. He came in. I'm trying to remember what it was for. It was this mishmash of artists, but he showed up, and Prince was kind of cool. He, no attitude. He just kind of did his thing. Most of those people when they came in, you would never know who they were. Everybody's got their hoodies on or walking in from outside, pretty low key. But that was a nice moment.
Miles Davis?
Strange. Miles didn't talk too much, just grumbled a lot. Didn't really talk much to his band. That's when he was doing his electric thing.
Yeah.
But it was just nice to be in the presence of a genius.
For our younger fans, I know you worked with Justin Timberlake.
Another great guy. He took the whole place, and they were in for like 2-3 weeks. And another great guy, great band, great bunch of people.
Now, how does that work? What is your interaction with them? Do they all come in at once, or how does that work?
The band is always in first.
Right.
The band is doing their thing maybe 8 hours before the artist comes in. So I'm dealing with the audio part for the bands, getting them set up, until sometimes their main engineers come and take over. Sometimes they bring in their full consoles. So that's my gig. And then usually the artist will come in at a certain point. But our place was kind of like your home. We made everybody feel comfortable. So they just walk around, they'd come into the office, sit, hang, ask questions. Everybody's very, very cool.
When these bands or acts come in, how long do they stay? I mean, does it take them a long time to get back into the groove? I mean, especially these acts that have a lot of choreography and dancing and stuff.
Well, with people like Madonna, J-Lo, trying to think, like Britney Spears, did a lot of work with her. In fact, she came in when she was a tot, when she was nobody, right out of Disney. And my night guy and I would laugh when some of these people would come in and we're going, oh, but Clive Davis brought her in. And I'm like, anybody that Clive Davis is touching is going to be huge. But we would laugh because she couldn't really sing, she couldn't dance. And a few months into it, she starts to get better and better, and then we don't see her. And then all of a sudden, it's like, goddess, Yeah. But that's what would happen with a lot of those young stars. Same thing with Miley Cyrus. Her dad brought her in for a private showcase with Clive, and she was, nothing to really write home about. And 6 months later, she's another one.
Wow.
But you were asking about dancing.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they would take the whole place. The main room would be where the band would set up and do their show. They'd take the next room over for choreography. And then the last room sometimes would be for vocalists to do all the background stuff.
Well, it seems like, you're like basically the producer of the studio or everything that goes on in the studio when they come in. So you must get to see like entire shows rehearsed before they even go out on the road. I mean, that's got to give you some kind of unique perspective, no?
Well, I don't think people realize how much time and energy that musicians put into a show. Back in the early days, the average time would be a month, 2 months. In fact, Meatloaf would come in and take a 3-month lockout. And they would rehearse that show 7 days a week. And when they went out there, that's why it looked so easy. They're all pros at what they do, but as the years went on, those 3 months turned into a month, into like 2 weeks, into like 10 days, because record companies started, chewing them down on budgets and all that. Yeah. But so much time.
Really, what's so impressive is the diversity of the kinds of acts that came through your doors. I mean, like you said, everything from rap to heavy metal and everything in between.
No, well, that was the beauty of it all, is that I could have James Taylor in one room and like Metallica in the next room. Just this mishmash. Some days it was just this crazy eclectic bunch of people. Right. But it was all great because you're getting a little bit of everything. And like the first time I worked with Anthrax, I didn't really know what to expect, and you turn out that these guys they're a great bunch of guys, and they're great musicians. You might think, they're a bunch of thrash. Yeah. They're not. Right. They're not. You catch them, when you're noodling around doing their own things. And in fact, Scott had turned me on to a great album with Jack DeJohnette and Keith Jarrett, and I forget who the other guy was. And I would never think that they would be listening to this. So whenever you think of somebody, there's a lot more depth to them, and that's why they're where they are.
Right. How about Bob Dylan? I know you have some good stories about Bob Dylan. You must.
He came in, and they were there for a long time. And one day, Dylan strolled into the office, and I'm sitting there, and he goes, hey, Keith, you have any money for a soda machine? And I'm like just dying, going, here's a guy who's worth millions. But I found out that Bob does not carry money. He had his, I forget what his name was, big, huge guy that followed him and did whatever he needed. But Bob, hoodie on, gloves. In fact, our doorman, one of the first weeks he was in, calls me up and says, Keith, there's a bum outside, and he's in the trash and he's pulling out like a bicycle wheel. And I'm like, okay. Well, he says he's coming up to your place. And I'm like, well, let him up. Who pops out of the elevator? Bob.
Did he have the wheel with him?
They had the wheel with him.
Can't help but notice that Lou Reed sign behind you. Did you ever get a chance to work with him?
He's the guy who would come in and have his tech change out like 50 speakers. And, you know, Lou really couldn't play, but he'd like, what do you think of this one? Like, they all sound the same.
And also you worked with Beyonce?
Beyonce, what a nice person. What a nice band, crew, the whole thing. But funny story, they came in, they brought in their entire system, which usually they don't do. They brought in these D&B speakers and they set them up. And once they started playing, everybody in the building was like freaking out because the desks up on like the 5th floor were like rolling across, pictures falling off the wall. They called something like, Keith, what is going on down there? I'm like, well, it's Beyonce. Well, you got to tell. I said, no, I'm not telling her anything. She can do whatever she wants. They had the fire department there because they thought the building was going to crack.
That's a great story.
But she would sit in the middle of the studio in this big leather chair with those things pointing at her. But she was great.
Most rock stars don't work your standard 9 to 5 days. What was the day in the life for you during those years?
Crazy. I usually was in there by 10, 11, out at 1 a.m. in the morning. And that is the same period I was still out playing 5 nights a week with a club date band. So it was like I was never home.
Were you living in Nutley?
What's that?
Were you in Nutley?
Yes. Yeah. And those were rough years with 2 little kids, just burning the fuel at both ends.
Yeah.
But the hours were tough. I'd go for weeks at a time and then just crash. Yeah.
During your 30 years at Montana, were you still out playing?
Yeah, trying to do that, make that place happen, keep everybody happy, and deal with my staff, and then on top of it, trying to, do the playing thing. In fact, I was doing a rock fusion project for a while in the city, and that was really consuming me. Doing that, plus the club date, plus that, and that was a very cool time. Mm-hmm. But I remember after Travis was born, I had told Marie, my wife, I said, I'll give this 2 more years. I said, if nothing happens with this, I'm done with the originals. I'll always do the club thing, but I'm done with the originals. It's just sucking the life out of me.
So you gave up the fusion band, then you've been playing basically in clubs since then. What's the name of the current band?
The band is New Power Soul. It's just a club date, wedding. We do a little bit of everything, private parties. But that's been a great run because we used to do a lot of stuff at the Waldorf for like Boomer Esiason. We played at Bon Jovi's house. We've played for Bruce at functions down in Rumson around there. So we're like a high level band, and those type of people call us to do work.
All right, time for some quick hits. Nicest person you've met in the business?
Michael Brecker. Michael Brecker's played on probably everybody's album. Sinatra, Bennett, everybody, every rock. I mean, he's the go-to.
Worst person you've met in the business?
J-Lo.
He didn't hesitate.
Favorite Jersey Shore town?
Ooh, Cape May.
Springsteen or Bon Jovi?
Springsteen.
Giants or Jets?
Giants.
Yankees or Mets?
Yankees.
Even though you've left a couple of times, you've come back to Nutley and actually you've spent most of your life in Nutley. When did you first come back?
81. 81 I came back. And that's when I started with the Voices band. That's when I met my wife. And I had said, I'll never come back to Nutley. And here I am.
What is it about Nutley that keeps you here?
I don't know, you know, you're away for a while, then you come back, and it's like, it's home.
How has it influenced your life?
Nutley was a great place to raise our kids. School systems were great. The parks, very convenient town, how everything's located, and the sense of community.
Where can we find your band's show schedule?
newpowersoul.net.
Keith Pied, thank you for joining us on Inside Nutley today. Good to see you, my old friend. And here's to the class of 78. Thank you.
My pleasure, Tom.